Just in case you didn't recognize him, that was Matt Schofield, one of my favorite blues players. Last week, I spent some time over a couple of practice sessions transcribing that clip that you can find on YouTube. It's called Matt Schofield Sophisticated Blues. In this video, I'm going to tell you why, if you aren't doing so already, you probably should be transcribing your favorite players. I'm also going to talk about how this should fit into your practice routine, so be sure to stick around to the end of the video for that. But first, let's talk about what transcribing actually is. I think most musicians would define transcribing as the act of listening to a piece of music, using your ear to work out the notes and the rhythms, and then notating all of that in some way. That being said, I did not notate the Matt Schofield clip from the start of the video, so don't ask me for tabs, I don't have any. And I don't think that it's always necessary to notate everything that you work out by ear, so for the sake of keeping this video concise, let's not talk about notation today. Let's just think of transcribing as the act of working out a piece of music by ear. If you want to learn about notation, there are channels out there for that, people who transcribe music full-time, professionally, people like Levi Clay. But now let's get to the title of this video, the 3 main advantages of transcribing other musicians. I'm going to briefly explain them first, and then later on we'll dig a bit deeper into each of them. So advantage number 1 of transcribing other musicians, it's probably the clearest path there is towards getting out of that rut you've been stuck in for the past few weeks or even the past few months, and we'll get to that soon enough. Advantage number 2, it's an enjoyable way of training your ear. If you're serious about getting into ear training, I would really recommend looking into apps like Ear Master Pro, which will give you a series of exercises to work through for both harmonic and rhythmic ear training. Apps like that are effective and they will improve your ability to transcribe music, but so will transcribing music. So I would recommend a combination of the two, since using ear training apps alone can get a bit tedious. Advantage number 3 is that once you reach a level of transcribing where you feel proficient, you feel like it's much less of a challenge than it used to be, once you get there, well, the world is pretty much your oyster in a sense. If you want to learn a cool Matthias Azzato lick, but you don't want to wait for Matthias Azzato himself to maybe one day release a tutorial on that specific lick with tab, where he takes you through it note by note slowly. If you know how to transcribe, which we'll get to later on in the video, you can just listen to it, work it out, and then start practicing and analyzing it. You won't have to hope and pray to the guitar gods that one day that tutorial will be released. So let's revisit each of those advantages in a little bit more detail, starting with number 1, which was using transcribing as a means for getting out of a rut. Now, whilst I don't necessarily feel like I've been in a rut recently, there is one little thing I've kind of been struggling to come up with new ideas for, and that is writing licks to play over the transition from the 1 chord to the 4 chord in a blues progression. Transcribing that Matt Schofield piece from the start of the video actually gave me 2 new licks that I can now play over those chord changes, and that I'm absolutely going to be using in my solos moving forward. If you're interested to know, these were the 2 licks. Prior to transcribing all of that, my approach to moving from the 1 to the 4 chord was very much focused on using outside sounds, like the whole tone scale and the half whole diminished scale. But listening to and learning from Matt's solo reminded me that I don't necessarily need to use those hip exotic scales to make those chord changes sound interesting every time. Sometimes it's better to use those sounds sparingly and focus more on playing simple licks that are interesting rhythmically. The second advantage was that it's an enjoyable way of training your ear, and that's because you're actually getting to play guitar and learn new licks, learn new chord voicings, chord progressions, whatever it may be, as you're transcribing. Like I said earlier, if you're serious about getting into ear training, I would recommend looking into products like Earmaster Pro, which will take you through a bunch of very specific ear training exercises that might include things like you listening to 3 different triad inversions played on a piano. You'll have to answer which of those triad inversions had the 5th in the bass, for example. These are exercises that you would do without an instrument in your hands, which is cool because you could do them from anywhere. You could do them when you're traveling or just being away from home in general without access to an instrument. But you're not exactly learning new musical vocabulary when you're using these ear training exercises in the same way that you would if you were to transcribe something. So basically, ear training apps are great to use because they train you to recognize specific intervals, chord voicings, triad inversions, rhythms, and more, which are all things that are going to improve your ability to transcribe music. But in addition to using them, you should be transcribing pieces of music that interest you at the same time, in my opinion. Why do both? Because transcribing is perhaps the best use of the skills that you'll develop from using these ear training apps. The third advantage of transcribing is that it increases your ability to learn from your favorite players who might not necessarily be teaching their methods online. Nowadays, it's becoming more and more common to see prolific guitar players release video courses and books, which I think is amazing and a big part of why I believe it's just an incredible time to be a guitar player right now. But not everyone is doing it, and not every player is going to want to do it. So what do you do when you come across an old Stevie Ray Vaughan clip and no one's posted a tutorial for it? Or you find a new player on Instagram, they play a lick that you hear and you just go, I want to learn that, but there's no tutorial. Well, here's what I would do. If it's a video, I'll download the clip, extract the audio, and put that into this piece of software I use called Transcribe. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, I've just been using the product for years and I really like it. It allows you to slow down or speed up the audio without altering the pitch, and you can easily loop sections of the audio as well. So I took the audio from that Matt Schofield clip and put it into Transcribe. I listened to the full thing a few times over, and then I mentally started to break it down into small phrases, which I would then loop using Transcribe. As soon as I had the first phrase down, I would then loop the next 2 or 3 phrases individually before taking the loop back to the start of the audio clip so that I could remind myself of how each phrase flowed into the next one. I repeated that process until I had the full thing down, and then I was able to enjoy practicing the full solo. It's a really liberating feeling knowing you have the ability to work out any lick that you hear and want to learn without having to constantly rely on tutorials, which is why I thought this would make for a good video topic for those of you that might not have already started transcribing music or started ear training in general. If that's you, I would really encourage you to start transcribing and start ear training. I promise you it will make you a much better musician. Now, how should transcribing fit into your practice routine? Well, depending on what you want to transcribe, it can take up a good chunk of time. For example, that Matt Schofield clip was around a minute long, and I'd say it took me around an hour and a half before I felt like I could confidently play it from start to finish using the correct rhythms. Practice routines I've done consistently in the past have always consisted of several warm-ups and exercises that I will practice for short periods of time, mixed with things that I'll practice for longer periods of time. The warm-ups and exercises that I'll typically practice for around 5 to 10 minutes each might include running scales, triads, technical exercises, and ear training exercises. Those are all things that generally feel a bit tedious when practiced for longer periods of time, so usually I like to keep them under 10 minutes. And usually what I'd spend the rest of my practice routine on is either improvisation or transcribing. A while back I realized that those two things are best practiced over longer periods of time. At least for me personally they are. You might feel differently. Generally speaking, I won't do both of them in the same practice session. I might do improvisation one day, transcribing the next, or improvisation for a few days in a row and then transcribing for a few days in a row. Basically, you should just experiment and find out what works for you and your individual routine. Alright guys, that does it for today's video. Before I go, I just want to make you aware that linked down in the description, you can find my website, bulletproofguitarplayer.com. That's where I host my instructional courses as well as bonus content based on my free YouTube lessons. Now, I don't want to mislead you into thinking that I teach you how to transcribe on that website, because I don't, but in case you're someone that's looking to learn music theory in a way that can actually be applied to the guitar, that's what I'm all about. That's what my courses are about, and I believe I can help you with that. So if you're interested, the link is in the description. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, subscribe, click the notifications bell to never miss another video. My name is Ross Campbell. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.